In life, we have questions that we may never have answered. Are we alone in the universe? Is there a God? What happens when I click that thumbs up button under a YouTube video? But thankfully, you're about to get the answer to an age-old question that has plagued scientists for centuries. Who would win in a fight between Skyrim's own half-dragon, half-person, half-werewolf, half-vampire, and Elden Ring's maidenless maniac? Whether you're a die-hard Skyrim fan or an Elden Ring enthusiast, you have most likely given this some thought. And I welcome you to add your opinion in the comments before you continue with the video. So I've maxed out my Elden Lord to level 713, and my Dragonborn has all of his skills at max level, so we are good to go. Now, assuming you've finished adding who you think would win and why, let's get into it. Okay, so firstly, we're going to have to cover the basic stats here, because any fight fan will tell you that height, weight, and reach are important. Of course, none of that will truly matter when the fireballs start flying, but we've still got to cover everything to be safe. After some scientific research that was researched scientifically, it will be no surprise for you to learn that the tallest race in Skyrim, or shall we say the highest, are the High Elves at 6'4". Although they weigh very little because they struggle to gain any real weight. And as for reach, they have extraordinarily long limbs with joints that allow their arms and legs to bend either way, weighing from 130 to 180 pounds, which is 59 to 82 kilograms. So as the Dragonborn can be any race, we will go for the High Elf. After a bit of digging, I found a site that has Blade or Blythe's height and compared his pixel height to the Tarnished, which showed that the Tarnished is basically 5'7", and according to bannerhealth.com, the average weight of a 5'7" male is 133 to 163 pounds. Yes, I know both the Elden Lord and Dragonborn can be male or female, but both of mine are male, so to keep things simple, that's what we're sticking with for this video. As for reach, I don't think the Elden Lord will be able to beat the long limbs and double jointed arms and legs of a High Elf, so we'll just give that to the Dragonborn. So for the weigh-in, we're giving 1 point to the Dragonborn. Both sides seem to be pretty proficient with any weapon they pick up, although there is the glaringly obvious fact that the Tarnished does need to gain experience in certain areas before they can properly use a weapon, whilst the Dragonborn can find a Daedric greatsword and use it with ease. The Dragonborn will pick up a bow in the tutorial and start landing shots, which should take months of training to do. They engage in combat using fire magic straight away and even beat trained soldiers in close quarters combat. On top of that, they take out giant frost spiders and a bear with no issues. The Tarnished, on the other hand, starts off with their weapon of choice for the tutorial and doesn't have the option to pick up anything else. They also come in contact with a tough enemy but are expected to lose this fight. But eventually, they also begin beating trained soldiers with different types of weapons, but as it takes a little longer to get to this stage, it would suggest that early on at least, the Tarnished is at a lower skill level in terms of combat. So this is a tricky one because early on, the Dragonborn clearly knows more about using weapons than the Tarnished, but as time goes on, the Elden Lord would find himself using much more intricate weapons and learning different styles of fighting, as well as mastering Ashes of War for each weapon, whilst the Dragonborn just kind of swings his iron sword the same way he swings his Daedric sword. And because we're talking about endgame here, the clear winner for raw skill would be the Elden Lord. The Dragonborn definitely has it better when it comes to passive abilities. For example, just touching the Lord Stone, the Dragonborn will have an additional 25% magic resistance and an extra 50 points in any armor rating. If they sleep, they'll gain a bonus to the experience they gain, and being married will give them the Lover's Comfort bonus, which means they'll be better at learning new skills by 15% for 8 hours. And there are so many huge combat boosting passive abilities, as well as the passive buffs that equipment can offer the Dragonborn as well. I think the biggest passive ability to keep in mind here is that the Dragonborn actually has the power of health regeneration. Yes, it's slow during combat, but it's still something the Elden Lord can't do. Unfortunately for the Tarnished, the only passive abilities they can really obtain are through the equipment that they have with them. Whilst most of these additional effects are pretty powerful, they disappear either straight away or shortly after the Tarnished unequips that item. One of the only exceptions here is if you go and hug Fia the Deathbed Companion at the Round Table Hold. She'll give you a lovely passive debuff to your health. Good luck with that. The good news is one of the items the Tarnished can have equipped, which will keep him buffed throughout the fight, is a powered up Great Rune. And these are powerful enough to boost his already crazy stats. Or in the case of Melania's Great Rune, the Elden Lord will actually restore health whenever attacking after taking damage. So if that is stacked with the Godskin Swaddling Cloth Talisman, which restores health after consecutive attacks, this basically puts the Elden Lord on par with the Dragonborn for passive healing. Okay, whilst the Tarnished might have been lacking in the passive department, it's all good because the amount of Ashes of War, incantations, sorceries, and consumables the Tarnished has at his fingertips is ridiculous. In fact, looking at just fire spells, so the Dragonborn has 10 fire spells to choose from, whilst the Elden Lord has 10 Fire Monk incantations, which is not including Black Flame, any Ashes of War, any sorceries, or even the Fire Giant incantations. The Elden Lord has so much more in his arsenal that it almost feels unfair, especially as he hits hard too. And then on top of that, the Wondrous Physic also has potential for taking advantage of the Dragonborn's weakness if used correctly. Okay, but let's not get this confused. The Dragonborn has plenty to choose from too. He has 5 major magic schools: Alteration, Conjuration, Destruction, Illusion, and Restoration. Each school has beginner all the way up to master level spells. These include summoning in warriors, creatures, and weapons, blasting fireballs, ice and electricity, magical barriers, healing, and so much more. As well as this, he has dragon shouts, powers he can use once a day, and the ability to become a werewolf or vampire. And whilst this does seem like a lot, most of the Dragonborn spells are just different tiers of the same spell. So saying he has 200 different spells to choose from means nothing if 20 of them are the most powerful versions and all the others are just watered down variations. I don't think a max level Dragonborn is going to resurrect a body on the battlefield with Expert Reanimate and then quickly equip Apprentice Reanimate for some sort of strategic edge. Along the same vein, the spells at the Elden Lord's disposal are all unique. Using Flame Sling to throw a ball of fire at an enemy is a simple move, but then going for a different fire spell like Rykard's Rancor would be a strategic way to cause damage behind the target. And then something like Black Flame, which yes, works exactly like Flame Sling, has an additional effect that burns the enemy for longer, but won't necessarily cause the same damage that Flame Sling could have done. I think we'd have to give both fighters a point here because whilst I do think the Elden Lord has better equipment overall, there is no denying that the natural passive abilities the Dragonborn has are just too powerful to ignore. Alduin is a static level 100 and boasts 6,905 health. Pretty impressive. And although Dragon Lord Placidusix, I probably said that wrong, doesn't have an actual level, it's recommended that you don't fight him until you're level 100. So we're on a level playing field here. Although saying that, he does have a huge health pool of 26,651, which is almost 4 Alduins at once. Pretty crazy to think the Dragonborn's whole thing was to get strong enough to fight a dragon, which is a quarter of the strength of an optional boss in Elden Ring. If we wanted to get technical with it, we'd have to look at both endgame bosses side by side. So comparing Alduin's 6,905 health to the Elden Beast's 22,127 in the base game, and then 31,008 in New Game 7, we can see that the Dragonborn would at least have to up their game if they wanted a chance at beating this boss. On the other hand, a maxed out Elden Lord wielding a giant crusher with 2 hands, with the occult affinity selected, they would hit for a respectable 1,137 physical damage. This means the Elden Lord could hit Alduin 6 times for 6,822 damage, and then just give him a little kick for the remaining 83 points of health. The only downside to this would be that the Elden Lord doesn't have the ability to Dragon Shout, which means they can't use Dragon Rend to drag Alduin back to the ground. Fortunately, they do have plenty of spells such as the Ancient Death Rancor that work like homing missiles. skills. It would just take a little longer than the 6.1 hits with a big hammer, but it will still do the job. And whilst that 1137 does sound impressive, it's actually nothing. Here's why Alduin would be absolutely cooked if he ran into the Elden Lord. So a maxed out Elden Lord running the Blasphemous Blade with no buffs could use the Ash of War hit for 7,032 damage. That is Alduin's whole life plus some change. But the highest damage number recorded in Elden Ring as of the 5th of August 2024 is by streamer Ainrun, who after using buff spells and equipping multiple different items for quick buffs, hit Consort Radahn for a whopping 105,527. That is 15.2 Alduins. The Elden Lord would hit the dragon so hard it would obliterate his family and anyone that ever loved him. So if we flip this the other way around, the Dragonborn can hit with a two-handed Dragonbone Warhammer for 1,736 damage. We'll get into that later, which means it would take around 17 to 18 hits to defeat the Elden Beast with his 31,008 health. However, like the Elden Lord, the Dragonborn would have to consume buffs to achieve this damage score. And whilst the Elden Lord would have enough time to one-shot Alduin, the buffs wouldn't last long enough for the Dragonborn to hit the Elden Beast 17 to 18 times. So he would either need to reapply or fight from a weaker position. The only upside here is that the Dragonborn has the Whirlwind Sprint Dragon Shout, so at least they wouldn't be chasing the Elden Beast around for 2 hours like we all had to when we first fought him. So I think it's probably quite obvious who the point's going to here. Okay, the Tarnished has a few allies. You have the others at the Round Table hold, but I'd argue that most, if not all of them, have their own goals and interests and probably wouldn't get involved with the Tarnished if they really needed it. Maybe Rogier and Selen would help, but if we're talking about it being when the Tarnished is at full power and has already become Elden Lord, these characters won't be around to help anymore. Of course, the characters that help take down Radahn actively fought alongside the Tarnished, so the Elden Lord definitely does have strong allies that can help. Obviously counting out some of them that don't make it to the end of the game. But maybe don't start cheering on the Tarnished side just yet, because the Dragonborn has basically the whole of Skyrim fighting for them. Anyone that isn't a monster or a bandit is at the very least a friend of the Dragonborn. So as far as allies go, it would be a handful of powerful characters helping out the Tarnished, versus a whole world filled with loyal followers ready to die for the Chosen One. The point very obviously lands in Skyrim's favor here. The base health stat value is 100 points for all races and characters in Skyrim. Whenever the player levels up and accesses the skill menu, they will be prompted to increase either magicka, health, or stamina by 10 points. And if every single level is upgraded towards health, the final value will be 900 points. The base health in Elden Ring, when your vigor is 99, is 2,100 health, which, let me just double check on my calculator. Just give me another second. Yeah, that's more than double the Dragonborn. The best damage you can achieve in the vanilla game without exploits is 1,736 damage using a Dragonbone Warhammer. You could probably do even more with a high level dagger and the times 15 damage sneak bonus, but it's very unlikely that in this scenario stealth would be an option for either fighter. So to achieve this level of damage, it does take quite a bit. The Dragonborn will need a Dragonbone Warhammer, which has the highest base damage. They'll need to enhance that hammer whilst wearing gauntlets, body armor, a ring, and an amulet of plus 29% smithing enhancements, as well as a 32% smithing enhancement potion, as well as 100 enchanting, plus all of the enchanting perks to augment the hammer with frost or fire perks for 162 magic damage per strike. And after that, they'll need to be wearing a ring, necklace, gauntlets, and boots, all with plus 47% two-handed damage. And then they'll need to drink a potion of fortified two-handed that adds 130% damage. And of course, if we throw in the Dragonborn DLC perk called Seeker of Might, it will make all combat skills, including two-handed, 10% more effective, which brings us to a top damage rating of 1,736. We kind of went on a bit of a damage rant earlier in the video for the Elden Lord, so to save you having to watch a bunch of the same numbers flying around whilst I shout at you, I'll just quickly show those numbers on screen, popping up right next to the Dragonborn's health. Yeah, So with the unarmored health of the Dragonborn being a small 900, he better hope that the Elden Lord doesn't catch him getting dressed, or it's going to be a one-punch KO. Even if we were to consider the smaller 1137 damage, things would not be looking good for Skyrim's savior. Fortunately, he will be strapped in some powerful armor for this, as well as blocking with a shield, and the armor and shields are both abilities that can be max level, which will boost the armor rating as well as the overall health. So it won't be as easy to take down the Dragonborn as you might think, but at full power, I think it's safe to say the Elden Lord definitely takes the point here. Let's talk immortality, because of course this is a huge factor in Elden Ring. Okay, so yes, the Tarnished is technically immortal because they are on a holy mission to become Elden Lord, whilst literally blessed by the outer god of the lands between. You can check my lore video for more information. And whilst demigods can't die in Elden Ring, whilst the Rune of Death is chilling with Malekith, we are talking about the Tarnished at full power. So you'd assume they've finished the quest to become Elden Lord and they've beaten Malekith, meaning the Death Rune is back and demigods can die normal deaths, and our Tarnished is no longer guided by the sight of grace. This levels the playing field because the Dragonborn isn't even close to immortal. He is just incredibly powerful. Supposedly, depending on the moral choices of the Dragonborn whilst they were alive, their soul could end up claimed by any of the Daedric princes in one of their own realms of oblivion. So they've got that to look forward to. So just to make this a little easier, we'll just acknowledge that both fighters are incredibly powerful, but both can very much die. So that is a point for each. All right, let's look at some of the most obvious hypotheticals and how they could potentially play out. So what if the Dragonborn used Fusro-Da? As we all know, most enemies that the Dragonborn decides to use the Force Shout on will ragdoll and fly over a mountain. Well, a Dragon Shout, or Thume, is actually classed as ancient magic, and the Tarnished is no newbie when it comes to fighting enemies with very specific magic-based abilities. In this scenario, the Tarnished could literally dampen all Dragon Shouts with a shield that has 100% magic damage negation, and then chucking on a few talismans that do something similar. He could also stack the spellproof liver consumable to basically render the Dragonborn shouts useless. Fusro-Da would likely still push him back slightly when his shield is up, but nothing like this. Although when fighting a boss in Elden Ring, it does take a few tries to learn when an enemy is going to use a move like this, so one wrong move in predetermining the shout, and the Tarnished is gone. What if the Elden Lord spammed Rivers of Blood? There's no shame in it. It happens to all guys during their first playthrough. Rivers of Blood practically got me through the game the first time. But what if the Elden Lord did this to the Dragonborn? Well, firstly, assuming gloves are completely off here and we're saying all status effects from both worlds can happen, then yes, the Dragonborn is in a tricky situation if he gets caught by this scummy move over and over again, especially if we look at the weaknesses of the ancient dragon man in the Shadow of the Erdtree, because his weakness is literally bleed damage, and he is half dragon, half man. So yes, this would obliterate the Dragonborn, but the Dragonborn isn't an idiot. He's extremely knowledgeable in combat and wouldn't stand and watch whilst the Tarnished spammed his health down over and over like what you do with your friends in Mortal Kombat. Firstly, the Dragonborn has a disarming shout which will 100% hit without the Elden Lord being able to block it, because we all know how vulnerable you are when trying to spam Rivers of Blood. As well as this, the Dragonborn has the ability to turn invisible to enemies when he crouches, as long as his sneaking skill is at max, which it will be. So he could literally disarm the Elden Lord and then disappear. And if he's running a dagger, that 15% sneak damage with daggers is gonna come in handy. I'd also argue that Rivers of Blood might not be the best weapon for the Elden Lord to wield here. He'd probably be much better off running the Dragon Hunter's Great Katana, which does 30% extra damage to dragon type enemies and an additional 15% to ancient dragon enemies, which will destroy the Dragonborn. What about the Mimic Tear? The Mimic Tear isn't as helpful as you might think in this scenario. In fact, the Dragonborn has plenty of summons as well, and once the Mimic Tear dies, the Elden Lord won't be able to summon anything else for the rest of that fight, whilst the Dragonborn has infinite access to summoning things like dragons and undead warriors. But yeah, please do throw more hypotheticals in the comments, because I want to nerd out and discuss this way more with everyone. So looking at the stats here, this could go a few ways. but almost always leaning towards the Elden Lord. If it was an all-out brawl in the streets, we're looking at a clear tarnished victory, just by overwhelming his enemy with a flurry of insane hits from powerful weapons, spells, and some fancy foot movement that the Dragonborn just doesn't have, or just straight hitting him with the Comet Azure spell. But one thing to note here, the Dragonborn could play this smart and just outlast the Elden Lord. Whilst he hits harder, has better equipment, and all of his weapons come with over-the-top abilities, the Elden Lord does have a problem. He's confined by the rules of a Souls-like. This means limited healing, one summon per fight, and watching that weight. The Dragonborn, on the other hand, can carry hundreds of healing potions, some that will do ridiculous numbers if he has max alchemy. On top of this, he has passive healing and spells that also heal really fast. He can summon in allies as many times as he needs to, and whilst there is a weight limit, it's not until he's carrying 410 swords that the overweight effect actually starts to kick in. So if the Dragonborn does play the long game, it won't matter how hard the Elden Lord hits. Personally, I'd say it's unlikely that there's gonna be a long game between two titans like this. And let's be honest, the Tarnished has done way more with way less. So yeah, in my opinion, the Elden Lord would destroy the Dragonborn in combat. But if this became a war and each side gathered their allies, Skyrim's side would be a little heavier, especially when you weigh up the fact that he sides with an actual army. He's the Thane of different towns and holds. He's the leader of multiple factions. One is literally a sneaky assassin death cult. He's on a first name basis with almost every powerful person in Skyrim, as well as having friends like the Greybeards and Parthenax, who is an ancient dragon capable of rallying dragons to his side. And on top of that, the Dragonborn has befriended warriors in the actual afterlife in Sovngarde. So, you know, he has friends. And in Elden Ring, the Tarnished does certainly have friends to call upon, and maybe those at the Round Table will chip in. However, most of the characters the Tarnished comes across meets the end of his sword for the most part. So winning a war is likely not on the cards for the FromSoft army. And to make things even harder for our fellow Tarnished, every fighter that falls on the battlefield can be resurrected by the Dragonborn or by one of his many necromancy practicing followers until the Elden Lord has just stood on his own against an army of monsters, mages, warriors, ghosts, werewolves, assassins, dragons, and the corpses of his friends. So yeah, our winner is the Elden Lord, but if the Dragonborn brings friends, Skyrim will easily prevail. But do let me know how you think this would go in the comments, as I love chatting about this sort of stuff. Please do subscribe for more, and as always, thanks for watching.
Oh! Uh-oh.
Oh, he's a ninja!
He's literally dressed like a turtle!
Wow.
Raphael, get him!
Don't kill him, play with him a bit. Oh.
I like turtles.